Hello, everyone. I want to talk about an article that was in the Los Angeles Times, April 20th, written by Natalie Kitroeff. Immigrants flooded California construction, worker pay sank. Here's why. Construction in Los Angeles has shifted from a heavily unionized labor force that was two-thirds white to a largely non-union one that is 70% Latino and heavily immigrant. What this article goes into is it shows basically how so Donald Trump's campaign is very much like the immigrants have come and stolen all of our jobs, and it isn't true. Construction, in this instance, the construction industry has gone away from union labor and gotten non-union labor, and much of it, at least in California and Los Angeles, has been immigrant. So it wasn't that immigrants came in and stole jobs, it's that companies went, oh, I don't want to pay union because I got to pay $40 an hour, and I got to pay pension and health care and all this other stuff. And unions have been eroded over the decades in this country. And unions, while not perfect, have helped brought a lot of benefits to the American worker. Weekends were created by unions. 8-hour workday were created by unions. Workers' comp, health benefits. Unions all came up with all of that stuff because during the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s, they were just basically taking advantage of every worker at every turn that they could. And that's when people started to unionize. And there was a lot of fights and stuff in that, but that's what unions did, is they helped get all of these benefits. And so they have been trying to do this forever. I mean, and I've quoted Harry Truman before, like in 1952, he was like, when Democrats walk away from the left towards the center, when they get away from all of the great stuff from the New Deal, you're giving power to the right. And he's exactly right. And this is what happens. This is what it looks like. So I'm going to go into some of the details of these two specific workers, one Eddie Ibarra and one Francisco Martinez, both in their 40s, work side by side building the walls of two of the newest condo buildings in downtown Los Angeles. By the way, downtown Los Angeles, there is so much construction, and every old building is in escrow, and something like 50 to 60% of them are Chinese companies. That's what's happening in downtown Los Angeles. Ibarra, born in Los Angeles, has built a solid middle-class lifestyle for more than 2 decades in the Carpenters Union, earning $40 an hour on top of a pension, health care, and unlimited vacation days. Martinez, born in Guadalajara, Mexico, works for a non-union contractor installing metal panels and other parts for $27.50 an hour. He doesn't have retirement savings, his insurance doesn't cover his family, and he gets 5 vacation days a year. So we're going to go into this, what's happened here. So in the span of a few decades, Los Angeles area construction went from an industry that was 2/3 white and largely unionized to one that is overwhelmingly Latino, mostly non-union, and heavily reliant on immigrants, according to the Los Angeles Times review of federal data. At the same time, the job got less lucrative. American construction workers today make $5 an hour less than they did in the early 70s after adjusting for inflation. They adjusted it for inflation. In 1973, they were making $31.84, and today they're making $25.97. The percentage of workers in a union in 1973 was just under 40%. Today, it's just under 14%. So, Trump said in his campaign, we're going to protect our jobs by protecting their borders, that the wall is going to give everybody more jobs, right? Here's the thing. For more than a decade before immigrants flooded the market, contractors and their corporate clients were pushing to undercut construction wages by shunning union labor. And there's always that cry from the right, oh, the unions, man, they're bad, they're too expensive, management has always been trying to undercut the unions. I've gone through it in show business, right? The writer's strike is about to go on. The Writers Guild, the WGA, is about to go on strike. Because what has been happening is the streaming companies are undercutting They're not paying, like, so if you write for, let's say, a network TV show, you write for Scandal or something like that, one of those network TV shows. And even though you're churning out, 13-hour scripts a season, if you write 13-hour scripts for, let's say, Netflix on a show, let's say Orange is the New Black, you're getting less. And Netflix is saying, I don't know, man, we can't pay. And it's like you're making billions of dollars. So they just always are looking for an angle to undercut people. And there's been several actor strikes over the last 10, 15 years. There's been a writer strike. So this is like, I've seen it in my business, and this is what they're doing. They're trying to undercut. Corporations don't want to use union labor, and then politicians come in and blame immigrants. It's always blame the immigrants. Whenever there's a problem, blame the immigrants. It's their fault. Even though corporations are evil and screw over working people of all ethnicities. Construction unions, focused on keeping their members happy and employed, fought to keep lucrative work building offices and highways instead of pouring money into recruiting masses of new workers. Non-union shops made aggressive inroads into home building with workers who had less experience. Immigrants are not the cause of this. They are the effect, said Ruth Milkman, a sociologist who has studied the history of construction in Southern California. The sequence of events is that the de-unionization and the accompanying deterioration of the jobs come first before immigrants. Of course, an influx of immigrants who would work for less made it easier for builders to quickly shift to non-union labor force. The share of immigrants in construction in California jumped from 13% in 1980 to 43% today, according to UCLA analysis of federal data. I've done several articles about this, about California farmers have been affected by the Trump's stricter immigration laws, as have been farmers in Wisconsin. And I would suggest watching those videos. They came out like a month or so ago. So this is what is going on here, and it's interesting if you go into the whole article, and I'll put the link below. It goes into very nobody is stealing anybody's job because nobody wants those jobs, especially for a non-union employer. Keeble said the trades are looking down on. Like, they talk about when the housing crisis happened in 2007, going into 2008. A bunch of people left the housing business. A good friend of mine's father-in-law was like big construction money. The money wasn't there anymore after the housing crisis. So then he's like 50 some years old having to work at a Home Depot. Right? And someone says, hey, you want to do the same job you were doing for half of the price? He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. An immigrant who's coming from a country where, it's whatever, $1 an hour or something like that is the minimum wage, is going to go, yeah, I'll do that. It's not the immigrant's fault. So in 2004, the NAHB and the Home Builders Institute started a program to teach prisoners in Illinois how to run pipes and electrical wires through a home. It's also working with state governments in Vermont and Massachusetts to introduce a training program for at-risk youth. But the idea that Americans don't want to get their hands dirty on a construction site, as some contend is the case with farm work, doesn't ring true for Tom Brown, head of the engineering contracting firm in San Diego. Look at the heart of America, the coal workers and the miners, he said. People aren't being honest when they say Americans don't want it. Brown left his job as a union operator of heavy equipment in 1984 to start his own business, Sierra Pacific West Inc. At first, he worked only with union tradespeople, but he soon switched to non-union labor force. He said 90% of his employees are good old redneck Americans and the rest are immigrants. But in the last few years, Brown has had trouble hiring. Before the housing crisis, he had more than 200 employees. That's down to 100 today. Many of his people simply retired, Brown said, and his remaining workforce is aging. The average age of a construction worker in the country is nearly 43 today, up from 36 and 85. He said he's had to turn a dozen applicants away, he said, because they can't pee in the bottle, they can't pass a drug test, or they have had some bad luck or a criminal record. That's a no-go for us. But you can go into a private prison and do labor, as it says in here. Yeah. It's almost better to get a job at McDonald's, this guy Brown says, than being a construction worker. That's how it's being portrayed. So it's really, and employers aren't even, they're not willing to raise the pay. It's an interesting situation, guys. But always remember that the blaming of the immigrants is another like false flag, or it's just it's an excuse for corporations to not have to take responsibility for how they've screwed over the working person. And then they lobby and own all the politicians and the judges and everybody else so that there's no real regulation. And now you got a big, Captain Deregulate is in the White House now. But Obama did a lot of deregulation. So did Clinton. So did Bush. That's what they do. And it's hurting American workers, and then we'll blame immigrants. Isn't that convenient? So like and subscribe, you guys. Go to the Patreon. You get a lot of cool stuff, bonus content. We're close to getting to the 500 mark. If we get to $500 a month, we can start releasing this as a podcast, and I'll release bonus content, audio, and all this other stuff. So thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and stay vigilant.